This is Zant from Ne Obliviscaris, and we're a six-piece progressive metal band from Melbourne, Australia, and we are releasing our new album called Exul on March 24th.
Beautiful, Zen. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Not a problem at all. Pleasure.
So, as you mentioned, Obliviscaris will unleash your latest album, Exul, today. So, it's an album that was almost 3 years in the making, bro. So, how does it feel to finally be able to share it with the world and take it off the shelf, I guess?
It'll be a great relief. The last few years have been quite difficult, as everyone else has been through. And there was a couple of times throughout the last few years where we didn't know as to whether or not the album would make it. At a lot of pauses, a lot of frustrations, and I think it's been a great relief to see the light at the end of the tunnel in regards to this. It's a long time coming, and I think the people will be able to tell the amount of effort and patience and frustrations that were kind of channeled into this album. And hopefully people will be able to appreciate that. So it'll be a cathartic moment for everyone to be able to listen to this for us. Yeah.
And I've been fortunate enough to have an advanced listen to it, mate. And I know this question isn't going to be easy for you to answer, bro, but tell us a bit about Exul from a musical point of view and what you were going for. Like, there's so much happening there.
It is quite a complex album. In some ways it can be considered a little bit simpler than the other albums, but at the same time it is still quite complex in when you're listening to it. And it does require, if people aren't necessarily used to any sort of progressive music, it does take a while to digest. Even when we're creating it, for me, I don't listen to a lot of progressive music myself. And it does take, even for me, being part of the writing experience, it does take a while for me to get my head around it. But when we write, we don't have any set goals as to what something has to sound like. We don't give ourselves limitations of where to go. And I think at the end of the day, we're all mature enough and have been around long enough to be able to compromise and to meet in an even setting, so that we all agree that this is how it should sound. And if we all enjoy that, then we're pretty sure that a lot of people will kind of be on the same page as well. And we have a good, I guess, feel that it'll be widely kind of enjoyed based upon all of us enjoying it.
And it's a sweepingly grand and beautiful album mixed with moments of harshness and ferocity. So was it contrasting styles something that was discussed and detailed going into the album, or did that sort of more take shape as you progressed?
No, it's basically from the start, we've always had the different shades and the strong contrasts also. We're very different musicians, all six of us. We all come from very different backgrounds. I like a lot of the darker, harsher sorts of music, and Tim being the clean vocalist and violinist, he listens to like an amazing array of music I wouldn't consider listening to, and a lot of it's very uplifting, a lot of it's upbeat, but at the same time I guess most people consider the contrast, Tim and myself, light and dark. That's not something that was ever planned or even considered. It's just how it turned out, and it works that way because Tim and I have a very good understanding and working relationship when it comes to our music. We have a common goal that we're reaching for. We both go down different paths to reach that, but at the same time we understand where both of us are coming from to actually reach that end goal of what we're creating. So each album has that kind of feel overall. But but those elements aren't even necessarily a forethought. It's when the music is being created, and creating that music without the limitations, it just, I guess, it naturally just amalgamates.
Yeah, cool. And you've been quoted as saying that overall there's a darker core to this album, perhaps more ominous than previous releases. So how so?
Well, a lot of them, I mean, some of the music obviously was written before the pandemic hit, and then well, the basis for the music was written prior to the pandemic, and a lot of my parts and also Tim's parts were written as the peak hysteria for the pandemic hit, say March 2020. And so everything got put on hold, and we had a lot of time to stew and go through the songs, and it was, and so it was I think it was an underlying thing which kind of came through. Well, I guess the last few years have been pretty kind of dark for us, and I think that translates through, especially for me. I mean, the pandemic in itself didn't necessarily affect me too much because I don't have an issue with isolation and being, away from everyone. So that's not really an issue for me, but it's more so, dealing with other, friends or family or other people in the band going through difficult experiences kind of rubs off. And also, I guess, the pandemic was something that happened directly after, we had the bushfires at the end of 2019, 2020. So that was also a big impact. And, having that kind of catastrophe into kind of a pandemic, it's bound to catch up to you in some ways. And so that I think is kind of infused into the album.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the band makes great use of violin and other string instruments throughout Exul. So how do you actually find and maintain the balance between instruments on an album like that epic?
Oh, a part of it, I guess you would consider the mixing process to find that balance. But if you're, we've never kind of, well, the violin is always, I guess, in a way considered almost a lead instrument in itself. And, we're not a standard band, and we like to express ourselves in different ways. And the violin, I think, is a useful tool to be able to do that. And it's, why limit yourself to, having guitar solos when you can have violin solos? And it's just, thinking outside the box a little bit in terms of how you can make something more interesting, or something, guitar can only make this sound. So, we can have that, but also why don't we, give the violin room to express itself. When we started the band originally, I was tossing up whether or not to want a violinist or a cellist. Initially, I wanted to have a cellist in the band, but we ended up having Tim coming on board. And at first, when he was finding his feet within playing violin within a metal band, it was more of a rhythmic thing from memory. And then over time, developing his confidence with playing in a metal band, and trying to be a bit more experimental and kind of developing from there. So I think it's definitely, now it's definitely a shining feature in what we do.
Yeah, most definitely. And there's another shining feature of what you do is the contrast in your harsh vocals and the cleaned by Tim. That's basically the cornerstone of much of the album's material, mate. But do you write those vocal parts together, or do you sort of write them separate and then piece them together afterwards?
It happens in a number of ways. Tim and myself, we will listen to the music, and then we'll come up with our own ideas. And then we will chat with each other about where we're thinking of doing our vocals. A lot of the time it may clash as to, this part, someone had their idea for this part, and then someone else has had their idea for the exact same part. And sometimes it can work for us interweaving our vocals, and it's not necessarily planned. It just works that way because Tim and I have a very different way of phrasing things. And so sometimes that automatically allows it to actually work without doing too much work with it. Other times it does require a little bit more work in working out placement and that sort of thing. But it's overall, it is, I guess, a collaborative effort. And obviously in a band, you're always offering, constructive feedback and whatnot. So it's, without the communication, as with any band, it needs to happen. Otherwise it won't work.
Yeah. And another massive part of your music is the emotion and almost theatrical elements in some parts, mate. So how hard are those things to convey through music?
For me, it's not overly difficult. I listen to a lot of dark music. I'm into a lot of dark and obscure things, and I guess music is where I can kind of channel all that into, and what better way than to do that with screaming. I find screaming is in what we do is not necessarily an angry thing, it's more of a passionate thing. And as with all of us in the band, we're all very in touch with music and the feel of how everything is. Personally, I find a lot of progressive music. I find myself quite disconnected from that sort of music. So for me, it doesn't necessarily connect too much on an emotional level. But for us, I think we're all quite in touch with the feel of music, and therefore, because we're all different musicians from different backgrounds, and we have that understanding between each other, it translates to what we create. So not only, I guess, in a sense, we are a progressive band, but also a band that people can feel the emotion coming from it, I guess.
Yeah. And Exul follows on from your successful and critically acclaimed 2017 album, So how does it differ musically?
For Earn, I think for this particular album, I think this album's probably a little bit darker than Earn, and a little bit more experimental. There's a few things we've done on Exul which we haven't necessarily touched on before. And also Earn was through producing and mixing and mastering Exul, there's somewhat of a different sound. So we use Mark Lewis from the US, who mixed our last album, but he was more involved in the process of this particular album. So there's I guess almost a more cohesive feel between us working with him to get the right sound that we were after, to convey what we do. And we kind of wanted a little bit more of a heavy sound, because we get a lot of people that will come up to us after shows who will say, oh, you guys are so much heavier live than you are on CD. So if you go back through our catalog, our sound, it's meant to be heavy, but it doesn't necessarily translate as heavy. Whereas when we play those songs live, it's so much bigger and heavier. And we wanted to kind of make the gap less. And so create an album that we can produce in a live setting and not have it vibe-wise too different.
Yeah, makes sense. And this year too, bro, Ne Obliviscaris celebrate 20 years as a band. So have you got anything special organized?
We're trying to plan a few things. It's just been a little bit hectic with the release of the new album. So once this album's out, we're trying to concentrate on a few things for later in the year. But yeah, 20 years is and a lot of people don't realize we've been around since 2003. Since it took us nine years to release our first album. So a lot of people think, you've only been around for like 11 years or something. But really, we've been around for twice as long.
Yeah.
And we've put in the hard yards to get where we are now. And so yeah, we have a few things planned, but and tours and that sort of thing. So looking forward to being able to celebrate that, I guess.
No worries. All right, then. Well, thanks very much for your time tonight, mate.